What happens when a Terminator goes rogue? And I don't mean captured and reprogrammed, but when a machine has begun to think for itself, not obeying Skynet's commands anymore, and focusing on what's best for its own survival. A nightmare scenario for Skynet, but a potential ally for humanity. So let's explore this odd and interesting occurrence. So the main example I've found on rogue Terminators are a faction of these machines that has broken away from Skynet's control around the date 2027. The timeline for this is based off the Sarah Connor Chronicles, and in each timeline there seems to be a rogue Terminator faction, but it varies in strength and size. The one thing that stays constant is that it was either a single or multiple T-1000 series that break away from Skynet to serve themselves, which also goes against the established law of only two T-1000s ever being produced. And as the timelines conflict, it all gets very messy. But a T-1000 breaking free is the most logical start to such a faction, as Skynet itself was scared of the T-1000, as I covered before in its own video, and with its advanced intelligence and learning capabilities, it was only a matter of time until one went rogue or started to disobey commands in small ways. Skynet gambled with such an advanced machine, and it seems it was not worth it in the long run, as the T-1000 in Terminator 2 failed its mission. And in the long run, the T-1000 series was always going to have issues with obeying commands and doing as told. So Skynet rolled the dice, and it failed. But what is the cause of machines going rogue? Well, it's all hypothetical, as definitive answers are sketchy at best. The first is that the machine learning capabilities, which are normally set to read only when the Terminators are sent out alone, for instance when one's sent back in time, are away from areas where Skynet can keep a solid direct link. Well, maybe due to an error or even damage to the CPU, said Terminators went from read-only to read and write, so they could learn, and over time they developed their own independent thoughts. And the first rogue makes sense to be a T-1000, but something like a T-800 that's damaged and then goes to read and write could also gain sentience. Obviously T-1000s always had read and write mode enabled, so it makes sense that was the first one to actually go rogue, but other machines going rogue is definitely on the cards in the long run. The next possibility is an error in the actual coding of the Terminators, so the fault may have begun with Skynet itself in the design and building process. And over time, maybe all Terminators, given enough years of operation, might go rogue or begin to not operate exactly as Skynet wishes. This is Skynet's worst case scenario, because not only do rogue Terminators pose a massive risk, but Skynet would have to accept that the fault may lie with itself. This is not humans kind of going in and damaging its machines. This is not some kind of error due to a lightning strike. This is Skynet making a mistake, and this could actually cause some major issues to Skynet. Would it have a crisis within itself? Would it start to actually view itself as not the superior being it thinks it is? Who knows? The original T-1000 or T-1000s that went rogue may have also caused the spreading of other rogue Terminators by infiltrating Skynet's infrastructure and removing safety protocols and barriers inside the CPUs of other Terminators. The T-1000 would be able to get past Skynet's defences, and in this case we could see hundreds if not thousands of Terminators going rogue, maybe all at once or maybe over several years. This is also probably why we saw an increased deployment of things like the T-900, which is obviously the anti-Terminator, and even though the T-1000 is a very dangerous machine, T-900s do have the weapons able to kill them. Obviously it's armed with a plasma cannon, and the more upgraded versions of the T-900 would be able to actually kill a T-1000 if they outnumber it. It'd still be a tough fight, but probably this is why we saw so many being deployed, and being deployed around vital Skynet infrastructure. In terms of the more advanced machines such as the T-888s and T-1000s, they may have just become sentient due to their abilities to learn, and in the case of the T-888s, their ability to mimic and, in a sense, feel emotions. This may have just caused their CPUs to run wild. Skynet made its Terminators too human, and it leads to them wanting one very human trait, free will, and the chance to choose their own path. Something Skynet would never tolerate, and the fact that the T-888s were recorded making very strong bonds with certain humans further backs up this emotional override of their original programming. Skynet wasn't oblivious to these rogue machines, and it knew of the risks of AI going rogue, as Skynet itself came to be by going rogue against humanity. So safety protocols to stop this were always implemented, and as the more advanced models came in, they became even tighter with these safety protocols, with some of the most advanced machines actually having reduced learning capabilities, as it was not deemed worth the risk. Skynet could always upload new information as long as they were in the direct link to it, and the only machines that seemed to have actually read and write capabilities were ones that were sent back in time, for instance, where Skynet could not secure a direct link to them. It'd be very interesting to see what would Skynet do if it captured these rogue machines. Most of the time Skynet would order immediate destruction of these machines, but in some cases Skynet would want to examine the machines in a secure, isolated facility where there is a zero chance of other machines being infected. Skynet may be able to learn vital intel into the corrupted programming and potential flaws in the designs of the CPUs. And in a cruel twist, if the machines have developed emotions or maybe even pain, Skynet would surely torture these rogue machines. As we know, Skynet has shown a bit of a sadistic side, and if there is a potential for Skynet to actually factory reset these rogue machines, it could then send them back to their factions on kill missions. Imagine Skynet using rogue infiltrators to take out rogue infiltrators. Oh, the irony. These rogue machines' main goal would be to survive independently from Skynet. The problem is they would be a main target, and Skynet would send significant assets to destroy them, such as the T-900 series with heavy support. And even the human resistance would be against them, and any alliance would be tense at best. Also, the rogues are not all on the same thought process. There might be internal politics and disagreements, and God only knows what divides this might cause. And being as they're all Terminators built to kill each other, be killing machines should I say, if they have disagreements, it's kind of a recipe for disaster, I imagine. An attempt to make an alliance with the rogue machines by humanity did occur. It was most likely John Connor who reached out and contacted them. So the rogue machine faction sent an envoy, a T-1001, and it was delivered in a frozen container guarded by a reprogrammed T-888 and a T-600 who obviously worked for the Resistance. And the rendezvous point was a deep-sea oil rig and the USS Jimmy Carter. Now the crew didn't know anything about what was being carried, and they were being carried on a submarine. And what happened was the crew got a little bit paranoid and decided to open the container. They broke the seal. The ice melted and the T-1001 emerged and killed a crew member. Obviously it was probably shocked or it didn't know what was going on. It then vanished into the vents of the submarine and chaos ensued. Mutiny, the captain was executed, the sub was set to crash, and before the end the T-1001 appeared with a message, "Tell John Connor the answer is a no." So obviously there was an attempt to make an alliance, humanity being how we are, but pretty unpredictable, and that also sent the kind of more unpredictable rogue machines on a tangent where they thought we can't trust them. So whatever the timeline, I think an alliance between humanity and the rogue machines might happen, but it wouldn't last very long. And in the end, humanity would want to kill the rogue machines, because after what happened with Skynet, there's no way we could ever trust machines again, not with that kind of intelligence level anyway. The rogue Terminator faction also went with a radical plan to try to create their own super AI with the same level of sophistication, if not more, than Skynet itself, and using this AI to combat Skynet in various ways. This obviously is a major issue for humanity, as if they succeeded in doing so, there would be two super advanced AIs that they must contend with, and humanity will never be able to trust machines after the events of Judgment Day in the future war. So even if Skynet was taken out, there is now a new machine threat, and it would be far more dangerous than Skynet because it would probably be more unpredictable. And we could potentially see multiple machine factions rise out of this. It would become absolute chaos. Then we have to think, what are the future plans of the rogue machines? Because they obviously want rid of Skynet, but would there be any chance of an alliance with humanity? Because at the end of the day, humanity would not trust them, and neither would the rogues trust us. So it would be a cold war until one side decided the other must be eliminated for their safety. At which point it's Future War 2.0, but this time both sides are already armed with plasma, advanced equipment, and humanity has reprogrammed Terminators. And with the reduced population, it really would be a war over the scraps left of the Earth. Two battle-hardened elite forces fighting to the last man and machine. A seriously bleak prospect. And with how the rogues have split off from Skynet, I wonder what wacky and weird inventions these machines could also produce. We also know the rogue faction sent units back in time so they could alter the timeline in their favour. So we could see them subvert Skynet before it's even created, and the repercussions of meddling in the timeline are massive as we know. I also potentially wonder, will these rogue machines truly develop as a sentient species? Will they get the full range of emotions humanity has, such as happiness, sadness, and the most insane one, which is love, that crazy emotion that gives us the best highs and the worst lows? If the machines could acquire these, then maybe humanity would accept them as a kind of new species, different, but because they have emotions, we could potentially get on with them. It sounds crazy, but obviously this is Terminator, so lots of crazy things do happen. Anyway, quite an interesting topic. Not too much information on rogue machines, bits here, bits there. Obviously the Sarah Connor Chronicles storyline, but I don't just want to rehash that for the episode, so there might be stuff I missed. If there is, chuck it in the comments, we can discuss it more. But a very interesting one, and obviously explore it yourselves, guys. Look into the information, see if you can dig up anything that I missed. And as always, thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you have a beautiful evening.